Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Adams Mystery Playhouse Podcast. Adams Mystery Playhouse is Colorado's only full-time mystery dinner theater. I am your co-host, as always, Nick Guida, and with me today, for a change, Marne Wilsquare. And how are you today, Marne?
Nick, I've decided I'm just going to howl all of the time. Waiting till 8 o'clock, I can't wait any longer. I'm just going to go around and howl constantly.
Okay. I can wait. But if you can, I understand. You know what I say, Marne? Everyone's different.
I know you said that earlier, and we all took it the wrong way.
And I didn't think I was ever going to get to say it again. Now, Marne, I can't imagine we have any guests with us today.
But we do, Nick. We have a returning guest, and his name is Chris Holling. How are you today, Chris?
Oh, well, I'm good now. Thank you for
Okay.
asking.
Oh.
Chris, did you know after your episode, did you hear about the flood of emails requesting you to return?
You mean both of them?
Well, no. Well, there were more than both of them. There were.
Oh.
I got one from a Mr. and Mrs. Holling.
Oh.
Katie sent one.
Your
And
wife.
of course,
Your wife.
yeah. Well, actually, I got 3 from you, if you'll remember.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Because
that makes sense.
you were afraid the first 2 didn't make it through.
I
didn't.
I was afraid the first one was lonely. I think.
I didn't know your dad's first name was Mister.
Yes, a descendant of Doctor, and yep, Mister Holling.
All right. Well, I'm fresh out of material.
Me too. That was the podcast. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna be done even sooner than you thought, Marne.
So much for that time crunch.
What are we going to talk about today?
You know, we talked about some other things the last time, and they got destroyed.
That's true.
But
But
where were we? Yeah,
That's the thing. I don't remember what they were. So
The only thing I do for sure remember was I was actually asking Nick about what his favorite character was to perform. I know that didn't get recorded.
favorite
Sorry.
character. I have to say one. I don't have a favorite character, but I'm not doing that explanation again because it was boring the first time. So I'll maybe give you a couple of my favorite characters. One is Julian Blood from Murder at Haunted Blood Mansion. That's
Okay.
one of my favorites. You've been in that. You were in that.
I have.
Oh, you were in this show too. This is a favorite one of mine. Welcome to Murder Mortuary, which is one of my all-time favorite shows. And it's Dr. Orlock, which is when I get to do my Boris Karloff impression. And the way that started was all Marne's fault.
It was?
Because, yeah, remember when we did the Halloween party for Tom Shane? His birthday's on Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow you decided I was going to go sing the Monster Mash. Kind of behind my back, if I remember correctly. And that was actually one of the best Monster Mash, and I'd never done it before. But because remember Douglas McLemore, the pianist?
Ah, yes.
He went on that job, and that's the only time in my life I ever sang the Monster Mash to live accompaniment. And it was actually quite good. So I was like, we need to write a mystery where I can play Boris Karloff. And that's how the show came about. But part of the show was Dr. Orlock had just been released from prison. And I would go and I would walk up to people and I would say, I was just released from prison on Tuesday from Supermax. And they would, and then people would usually say, well, what for what? And or what did you do? That's what they would say. What did you do? And I would say, I was completely innocent of all charges. And I would say that for hundreds of shows. And so there's this woman wandering around the lobby one night. She kind of looks lost, and I walk up to her and I go, how do you do? I'm Dr. Orlock. And I go through my whole spiel of, I was just released from Supermax. and she's just like staring at me. And I said, of course, I was innocent of all charges. And she looked at me and she goes, yes, we had a very good friend who was sent to prison, and he was innocent. And I was like, I was like, I never had a joke bombed as horribly ever as that one. And I went, oh yes, yes, that's terrible. I kind of just slinked away from her. But those are two of my favorite characters / shows. So there's an example of me.
That's
What
fun.
makes what makes me tick?
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of monster mashes and Marn doing things behind your back, there was one time that I got a phone call said I need you for this performance. And funny thing, it's at your old high school. We're doing it for Halloween. I don't know if Martin even remembers this at all.
Trying-
But they wanted to make sure that they had some characters that were walking around that was like
It was
the,
for
the
after
big bad
prom, wasn't it?
wolf, and yeah, I think
Yes,
so,
yes,
for
yes.
after prom.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she said it's gonna be at your old high school, and it'll be great, and it'll be perfect. And I just we need scary people to walk around. And I was, okay, is there like a plot or something? Is this like a show? Like, no, you just have to be there and look scary and scare kids, but not too much. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I can do that. And then we get there, and I dress up in my, what was it? It was a wolf in grandma's clothing, because I believe the
Right.
costuming was a little easier. So I had some wolf gloves and a mask and like a draping giant nightie. And I remember asking, like, okay, am I interacting with these kids? Like, what am I doing? Oh no, just scare them.
You're going like this. What is my motivation?
Right. Do I secretly want to be friends with these kids as the werewolf? Are they my new friends? I just need to get in the spirit of the character. And so because we ultimately decided that the werewolf couldn't talk, and maybe it's because I was talking too much, then I spent the entire set of about 3 or 4 hours just jumping out and making this terrible, awful sound with the back of my throat and scaring kids, which worked great. But then I was hoarse for like 2 days after that for not saying anything.
My favorite part of the story is, well, then it was decided that I can't talk.
Because I was talking too much.
Right. And
Yeah, that's
and
Chris for
so
you.
yeah, so I guess I didn't have the opportunity to actually shine as the deeper thought, like the deep thought process werewolf,
No,
the
we don't
the
think
true.
these things through, Chris. We just do them. Okay, you go out there. What would a wolf in grandma's clothing do in that situation? And you just go with it.
Yeah, I think he tried to lure the kids in there. It's always that little Red Riding Hood has a conversation with the wolf. The wolf can talk. What great big teeth you have! The better to eat you with. But this werewolf was, I guess he was like the younger brother that just had a speech impediment or
Well,
something.
you just said though, see, in Little Red Riding Hood, it's not a werewolf; it's a wolf, which wolves, of course, would talk, but never a werewolf.
Oh,
Uh, yeah,
that's
you messed
clear.
up
See,
again.
where were you to explain this to me? That was the problem.
Well, and that's I don't know. That's a good question because usually that's what I do is I give people their motivation, and the next thing you know, they're playing the role exactly as I intended them to.
Yeah, right.
I do remember actually a different occasion. You're talking about we don't plan these things out. There was one occasion we had there was a private show, and I think somebody backed out at the last second. And I get a phone call from Marn, says I need you here for a show. It's it's in 2 hours. Okay. I guess, yeah, I think I can make that. And it's a show I'd never done before. And I believe I remember distinctly having the yacht captain hat handed to me. And I'm trying to remember what the character was for it, but I remember it was being handed to me, and Marn Marn said, "Okay, are you ready? Let's get going downstairs. We're gonna open up the doors in about 10 minutes." I said, "Okay, yeah, but can I can I see the script?" She goes, "Yeah, there's no time. You'll be fine." And I did the show, and
And you
I
were great.
I
You don't know
apparently
you don't know
Yeah.
what the show
I
was?
I remember having the captain's hat, so I wonder if it was a luau type show.
Are we sure it
No,
wasn't the original Who Wants to Murder a Millionaire?
I think Chris was in grade school when we did that show. Because Millionaire's pretty old.
Yeah.
I have one I wonder if you remember, because I thought this was funny, and I think I did this to you. But we booked we booked you on a private show in the William Simpson room right across from my office. You were going to be the detective. I think it was actually the first time you were ever going to be the detective. And you called me and asked me what the
Oh.
group did. And I told you, and I knew this the whole time. And I said, well, this is what they do. And you go, deadly seriously. Well, that's weird. That's what my dad does. And I went, huh. Anyway, and then you got there, and it was your dad's company holiday party. And I didn't tell you in advance.
Yeah, I do recall all of that actually. Yeah, and that's a hard show to do in the first place. That's the hardest detective piece I've had to do, because it's really difficult when you have the 8 people in there. It's so focused on you and keeping up the energy, and me not going, no, Dad, that's not right. We're trying to adjust it at that point. Yeah, I was glad to be thrown to the werewolves,
In
so
my
to speak.
opinion, the smaller the crowd, the harder the show.
I
It
totally
just,
agree.
uh,
Oh, God.
until
Oh,
you
yeah.
get to like 600 people up, and then those get hard also.
Sure.
Guys, what show is it that we say the line is, I just wanted to play with the horn?
What?
What?
Nick, you know, or is it, what's the one we,
Play with the
it's,
horn.
yeah, it's a, it's a
No idea.
recent show that we've been doing of, oh, I know what it is. It's in Made for TV Holiday Homicide, and
What?
doesn't
What part of it?
it, no, wait a minute.
I mean, I was
Is
in
it,
that show, but
is it an EMT that says, I just like to play with the horn?
Oh, the
the
siren.
siren.
Oh
The
my.
siren.
Oh, oh.
Yeah. I know, because the horn sounds kind of
Yeah,
naughty.
that's a totally different prop and
Yeah.
gag. I just like to
Yeah.
play with the horn.
Yeah, no, that's the siren in
And
Yes, the siren.
which show is that?
that's made for TV.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yeah,
it
it's
an
the
audience
EMT.
member who says that? Oh, the EMT.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
the EMT in the audience.
Okay. Because every time the audience member says that line, I think of Chris.
I'm glad you do, because if you watch my facial expression when they say that line, because I for those that have never seen the show, it's an EMT, and the question is, well, why is it that you became an EMT? Did you find your calling? And they give their reasons of, I wanted to help people, and I I just like to play with the siren. And if you watch my facial expression when that happens, I point at them. I'm like, yeah, I get that.
I know.
That
I
makes
know.
sense.
And I do watch your facial expression because you're also an EMT and fireman by day, and I can just picture you wanting to play with the siren because you're just a
That's-
big kid.
that is very true.
Yeah.
All those things.
Yeah, that's why he had to leave the parking patrol, because
Oh.
there was nothing to play with.
That was such a terrible job.
I know you. I remember, and if I'm not mistaken, here you can tell me if I am. Didn't you go to the city and tell them they were doing it all wrong?
No, not. That's such a terrible way to put that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what you did.
Yeah, not outright. Okay.
Yeah.
No, they
'Cause-
had trained me to make sure that you educate, don't dominate, was their phrase. And I took a lot of time to talk with people and say, this is what's going on. Go ahead and go about your day. Don't worry about it. I'm glad I was able to talk to you. And more often than not, people would thank me after they're done cursing me out. Okay, well, thank you for taking the time, even though this sucks. And then I was fired from that job because I did not issue enough tickets. They don't have a quota, and I wasn't dominating. But that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I knew that's why you lost the job, because you went in and said, I've got a few pointers on how to run the parking in this city.
well, I like that. Educate, don't dominate. I think we should take that on, Nick, and as part of our credo here, doing theater. Like we won't educate, we'll just dominate.
Dominate, don't educate.
Dominate, don't educate.
Yeah.
That's right. But you know what? Speaking of made-for-TV holiday homicide, I don't know how, Chris, you pulled this off,
I
but
don't know either. What are we talking about?
you were playing. What's the name of the character you were? Norman? No.
Yes,
Yes, Norman.
Norman B. Cheney.
That's right.
Norman B. Cheney. And um, Nick said, "Well, how should we costume that character?" And I said, "Well, let's do the Mr. Rogers sweater because the movie's coming out about Mr. Rogers and it's such a hot thing." So we get the sweater and you put on the light blue shirt like we asked you to and the tie and everything. And all the other with the part sharing, and there were two other guys that played that, but invariably you were the only one that got. People would say, "Well, had to have been him because he looks like Mr. Rogers." I don't know how you pulled that off. Nobody else did.
I don't know. I didn't see everybody else's the other two guys' costumes, but I was very careful to look at specifically the trailer that was coming out and such to match to the red sweater. And so I had the right tie, I combed my hair the right way, I had the right shoes, and I made sure I was clean shaven for it. And I the thing that just blew my mind about that show is I have never been hit on more as a character in any of the other shows that I've done with you guys. I got hit on often in that show
As Mr. Rogers.
as Mr. Rogers, which I can only be convinced, but I don't know if it's because there's this this like, oh, he's so caring, and I'm trying to figure out how to say it without being inappropriate.
I actually witnessed, because I've heard I've heard stories from a lot of performers about their popularity, but I actually I actually witnessed him getting hit on. Like a man and two women, and they came up and to Chris, and we're going across the street to the bar, and my friend thinks you're really cute. And he's actually saying all this to him. And I was wondering if you'd like to join us. And I was standing there in my mind going, I don't believe it. It's true. All these years, I thought he was lying. And he goes, well, because I think at this point you had your firefighter slash paramedic personality on. That's very kind, but I'm married. You said it very seriously. It's almost like the next sentence should have been, and I take marriage seriously.
Well, I do.
Well, I have a topper for that, Chris. In this last run of They Came From Below, when I played, what was the name of my character, Nick? Kitty?
Kitty Kilgallen.
Kitty Kilgallen, that's right. And three millennials. I don't
Oh.
remember. I think it was two women and a man. But they said I had a nice behind. And they
Oh.
didn't say it that way, though. They said, you have the best butt in the whole cast or something like that.
Wow.
And yeah.
And unfortunately, Marne had to put on her paramedic face and said, well, unfortunately, I'm married. And I take that seriously. I should have kept it because there was a comment card that said and they put their phone number on it and said, if he's single, have him call me.
Ooh.
Wow.
And they described him, it was very clear it was me. I can't remember, but there's a good chance it happened during the senior ride.
Oh.
The RTD senior ride, but I'm not sure. But we have to now move on. That was a lot of fun today, but we need to move on to our popular segment, which of course is the mini mystery. The name of today's mystery is Accidental Death. Marne is the narrator. Chris is policeman. And I, of course, will be Professor Fordney. Here we go with Accidental Death.
Returning to town late one night, Professor Fordney was driving along an unfrequented road when the sight of a motorcycle policeman examining a car in a ditch caused him to stop and offer his services. Joining the policeman, he found that a man, obviously the driver, had been thrown through the windshield and was lying about 6 feet from the car. After a brief examination, Fordney stated,
Notice the terrible cut about the man's head. The jugular vein is completely severed. The bent steering wheel, shattered glass, and the blood on the front seat and the floor of the car are mute evidence of the tragedy. The speedometer had stopped at 62.
A search of the body revealed nothing unusual except that the man wore only one glove. The other could not be found. The professor was pondering this when the policeman remarked,
I'm reporting this as an accidental death. Is that how you see it, sir?
And I think you'd better change that to murder. In the absence of any further evidence, it seems to be pretty clearly indicated.
Murder? I don't understand how you make that out.
After explaining his reason, the professor returned to his car and drove down the wide, smooth highway toward home and a good night's rest. Fordney's deduction was confirmed when the missing glove and the murderer were found.
Well, there you go. That mystery was a little different today. How had Professor Fordney arrived at his startling conclusion? Well, there you are. Another episode in the box with a bow on it.
A pretty bow.
A pretty bow. I think the pretty was implied. If it's a bow, it's not going to be ugly.
Best bow.
What's that?
Best bow.
Best bow.
I have the best bow.
Best in
All right.
bow.
All right. Well, anyway, I would like to thank our guests. Let's thank them individually. Let's start with Chris. Chris, thank you for joining us,
Thank you for having me here.
and thank you, Marne.
Thanks, Nick. It's been fun. Thank you, Chris.
And don't forget to join us for our next episode of the Adams Mystery Playhouse Podcast.
Dun, 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 dun.